Liren takes on Nepomniachtchi in the sixth game of the World Chess Championship being played in Astana, Kazakhstan. Ding is white and he trails the match at this point by 2 points to 3. White started with d4, black played knight f6, white played knight f3, black played d5, and here white played bishop f4 for the first time in the match, and this is the London system. The London system is an opening which is characterized by the early development of the bishop from f4 and placement of the pawns on c3, d4 and e3. It's considered to be a very modest opening. It's a positional opening with long-term objectives, and white basically keeps his pieces reasonably well placed and flexible, waiting for black's weakness to attack later in the game. Here black played c5, white responded e3, black played knight c6, developing his pieces, and white played knight bd2. After cd4, ed4, black played bishop f5, and we already have a very important imbalance in the game where white has an extra pawn on the queen side, the c pawn, and black has an extra pawn in the center, the e pawn. So we have a pawn structure which is called the Carlsbad structure, and we have already encountered this in the third game of the present World Chess Championship. Well, if we compare this position with the Queen's Gambit exchange variation, it is very similar. So let's go through some of the moves of Queen's Gambit to understand this pawn structure better. In the Queen's Gambit declined, white usually plays c4 and black plays e6, after which the development of the knights, white usually takes on cd5, that is the exchange variation, and black takes back ed5. Here I had already explained in detail the ideas for white and black in the third game of the present World Championship, where white has a majority. It is the same structure where white has a majority in the center, an extra pawn in the center, black has an extra pawn on the c file. If we compare this position with the position which arose in the game after sixth move, it is exactly the mirror version where black has an extra pawn on the e file and white has an extra pawn on the c file. Well, the ideas, as had already been explained by me in the third game, is since black has an extra half open c file for his rook, it's more convenient for him to attack on the queen side by lesser number of pawns, and that is called the minority attack. So in future, a possible plan by black could be advancement of this pawn with placement of rook on c8, and maybe the other rook will join on b8. So this is considered to be a very easy plan for black, and white has some domination in the center. But in this game, let's see how white and black continue with their plans. White plays c3, black played e6, and here white played bishop to b5. He is developing his pieces. Basically, white would love to cut across black's idea of minority attack. Black develops his bishop. After the bishops are exchanged, white castled, black also castled. White played rook e1, placing his rook on the half open file. So both the players have completed their opening moves, and now we have a very interesting middle game coming up. Black played h6. His idea is basically to preserve this bishop on f5, which he believes is an active bishop. It's placed on a very nice diagonal. So he wants to preserve the bishop against a possible knight foray by white. If white plays knight h4, planning to exchange this active bishop for a knight, then in this case black could retreat to h7, and that is why he played the move h6. White continued with knight e5, a strong square for the knight in the center. One of the ideas is that if black continues or plans minority attack by pushing the pawn on b5 and placing the rook on c8, in that case white can have a very nice idea of cutting across black's plan by taking the knight and then playing b4, fixing the c pawn, and then placing the other knight on c5 square. So this could have been white's idea to black's plan of minority attack. As we see, black's plan could not even take place because white very skillfully has placed his bishop on c5 and knight on e5 to cut across black's plan of b5 b4. That is why black avoided white's idea by playing knight to e7. He does not allow white to take on c6 and establish a hold on the c5 square with his knight. Now white played a very thematic move in this position, a plan which he had played previously in the third game. Their ding was black and he was playing exactly with the same pawn structure which is playing with white pieces. He played a4, which is a very interesting move. Basically, white is setting his pawn majority in motion and he is discouraging black from playing a6, b5, rook c8 and later b4, the infamous minority attack. So white is discouraging black from playing that idea, and here black played a6, which, as we shall see, was probably the root of black's problems in future. Black could have played any other move like rook c8, but the move a6 basically places his pawns on the same square of his bishop. Now, if you see the pawn structure, some of the pawns, the d5 pawn, e6 pawn, and in future if a6 and b7 are placed on the same square of the bishop, black's bishop gets restricted, and the opposing square of the pawns, the dark squares, would become quite weak, and white could invade through them. As we shall see in the game, white retreated bishop f1, and here black played knight d7. The move a6 was played basically to remove the bishop from control of d7 square so that he could challenge the knight on e5. But as we shall see, this move has basically allowed white to play a5. After exchange of the knights, he played a5, fixing the pawns on the light squares, which is the same square of the bishop. And when we fix the pawns on the same square of the bishop, the opposing squares, or the opposite squares, in this case the dark squares, become vulnerable to invasion by the opponent pieces. So after this, white's knight can very easily reach the point c5 and apply pressure on black's position. So white has a long-term pressure against black's position. One of the moves which black could have tried is a5, not allowing a grip on the c5 square. He could have followed it up with b6, and although the square b5 is weak, white can utilize this square, which is undefended by black's pawn, but the situation would not have been as grave as it happened in the game. Well, back to the game, we have a5 by white. Now, one of white's ideas is to play b4, and although the pawn on c3 seems very weak, but white will follow the move b4 by placing his knight on c5. He would play knight from d2 to b3 and put his knight on c5. That way covering the c file so that the c3 pawn cannot be attacked. And the knight on c5 would be very strong. It cannot be chased by any of black's pawns, and it will apply a lot of pressure on the queen side. That is why black played queen to c7. Well, basically putting pressure on the c3 pawn so that when white plays b4, black could capture on c3. White played queen f3, supporting c3, and once again he is threatening to play b4 and put pressure on black's position. Well, the move b4 itself is not as powerful as the placement of the knight on c5 subsequently. So once again black prevented b4 by playing rook fc8. And once again white played a very nice move, rook a3. Basically it supports the c3 pawn once again, but more importantly, white prevents black from playing a move like b5, which in a way would have been a desirable move for black. But here white could take a b6. After queen b6, he would continue with his plan of playing b4 followed by rook to a1, putting pressure on this a6 pawn. Don't forget, the bishop from f1 also targets the a6 pawn. So here, if black plays a5 for instance, trying to dissolve his weak pawn, white would still continue rook a1, and now the a pawn is pinned. You can't take ab because this a8 rook would be captured by white. So this position is good for white. He would win the a5 pawn in the next move and have a winning position. So in order to get this position, white played rook a3, discouraging black from playing b6. Well, it is very interesting to note that the players, they not only improve their own position, but they also restrict their opponent's plans. And that is the secret or a hallmark of a great player. Here, black played his bishop to g6, and white played knight to b3. He wants to put his knight on c5. As we have seen, black is not able to do anything against it. He is unable to chase the knight with his pawns. Black played knight c6. Now he discourages the white knight from coming to c5 because the a5 pawn would be left undefended. White played queen g3, trying to exchange the black queen and then play knight c5. So he's trying to play some endgame where white would have a very pleasant pressure. Black avoided queen exchange, and now white played a very instructive move. If you have followed my video or explanation in the previous game, you would have seen that a single weakness quite often is not sufficient to win a game in chess. If our opponents defend stubbornly, we need to find another weakness, an alternate weakness, and then we have to keep on shifting our attack between the two weaknesses. That way we can break our opponent's defense. Here white played h4. So he wants to take space on the king side and create opportunities for attack against the black king in future. So he has a weakness on b7. He has the idea of placing his knight on c5, and he has another idea of a possible attack on the king side. So this is a very instructive move. Black played rook e8. He needs some plan. So he is looking for a counter attack or a break by playing e5. Now white played knight c5. Black took chance and immediately played e5. It's easy to see that if white captures with his pawn, the knight on c5 would be left undefended. Here white played the move rook b3. There was an alternative of playing b4, strengthening his knight and then threatening to take the e-pawn, after which black might have to play e4 and white would have an advantage if he played f3. So that was an alternate way of playing, but white played rook b3, which is also a good move. It simply targets the b7 pawn, the weakness in black's position. Black played knight a5. He took the pawn, but the moment he released his knight from c6, white played the intermediate move rook e5. So black took a pawn, white also took a pawn. Material is equal, but now black's d5 pawn is also weak along with the b7 pawn. Black is forced to play queen f6. The queen has no other squares. If it moves to, well, if the queen moves to d6, it's very easy to see that white will have a discovered attack. He can simply play rook e8 and then capture the black queen on d6. If black plays queen to f8, white would play knight to d7, and the queen has no other square than to go to d6, where again white plays rook e8 and he would win the queen. Here if black played queen to d8, so that would allow white to take on b7 with his knight and attack the queen. He would be a pawn up. Therefore, black is forced to play queen f6. That was the move he played. And white moved his rook, which was attacked by the knight, and he now attacks black's knight. Black played knight to c4, attacking the rook again. White is forced to take on c4. Black took dc4, and now it seems black has finally managed to move the pawn away from the weak d5 square and, well, fix the b2 pawn. He can counter attack by playing queen b6. So he has finally managed to achieve perhaps a position with some counterplay. But white played a series of very nice moves and proved that he has the advantage. White played h5. First, he removed the bishop from d6. Black played bishop to c2. And now white played knight takes b7, allowing black to double attack the knight and the pawn. The knight has to move. Black will take back the pawn on b2, and we will have a very interesting imbalance. White found a very nice move in this position. He moved his knight to d6. The square d6 doesn't have any support, but we have seen just a few moves back that black queen cannot come to d6 because white will capture on e8 and the queen indirectly supports d6. The knight on d6 attacks black's rook on e8 and the pawn on c4. So first black captured the rook, white took the rook with his queen. Now the queen is placed in the center and it has a lot of great ideas from the center. Black took on b2 and now white played a very interesting move, that is rook to a5. It's a brilliant move, and this is the move which gradually put white on top. He is trying to activate his rook by playing rook c5, attacking c4, and then move to the 7th rank, attacking the king. So rook a5 is a very useful move. It is worth noting that knight to e8 at once looks brilliant because it attacks g7, but then black could simply take the knight with his rook. So this was a brilliant resource which black had. White would take the rook and it seems white is winning because white is an exchange up, but after the king moves, white has his rook to defend, and wherever the rook moves, let's say the rook takes the pawn. Here if the rook takes the pawn, black has the second idea, that is of checking the white king and delivering a perpetual check with a draw. The king has only one move to go. Black will check once again on f5, and the best move for the king is to retreat to g1, after which the game would repeat. Here after queen f4, white cannot go to h3 because then black would play bishop f5 check, and white cannot defend the check with his pawn because black would then play queen f2 check. Therefore the move knight e8, although it looks very good for white, but is actually a blunder which allows black to sacrifice his exchange and escape with a perpetual check. Here white played rook to a5. The idea being that if black captures on c3, attacking the rook on a5, then white will come up with the same idea, knight e8. The difference being that here rook e8, queen e8, king h7, and black does not have the same perpetual check by playing queen c1 and queen f4. Here black does not have check because the queen from e8 is controlling the e1 square, and the rook also is controlling the a1 square. So the queen has no checks and there is no perpetual. Besides, after queen c3, knight e8, the other defense, that is black can try f6, attacking white's queen. But here white has a brilliant resource. He can capture the f6 with his knight, sacrificing his knight. After black takes gf6, white will play queen d5 check with the idea of capturing the a8 rook. It's a double attack. The queen checks king as well as the rook, and white is planning to capture the a8 rook with a check so that black does not have time to capture the a5 rook once white's queen is not on d5. So black will play king h7. White cannot take queen a8 at once because black will capture the a5 rook. So white will play queen b7 check. It's an intermediate move. Before capturing the rook on a8, white ensures that black's king is on the back rank so that I can capture the rook with a check. And in the final position, white is an exchange up. He is winning. So this was white's idea when he played the move rook a5. Black cannot capture on c3. Black moved king h7. It's a nice move because here again black tempts white into playing knight e8. But as we have seen in the previous move, black can play the brilliant move rook e8, sacrificing in his exchange, and then and then play queen c1 check with a draw. So this was black's idea when he played king h7. But white is ready with the idea. He played rook c5 from a5 with the idea to capture the c pawn, as well as move up to c7 from where it can attack the black king. Black played queen c1 check. White went king h2. And now black played f6. Black's idea is to move queen g5 at time to defend the g7 pawn when white moves rook c7. And he is hoping that his extra pawn on a file, the passed pawn on a file, would give him good counterplay if he could manage to defend against white's attack. White went queen g3, black played a5. He's advancing his a pawn. White captured the c4 pawn. He's a pawn up. Black continued to advance the pawn. Now black is creating counterplay. He is moving towards promotion. White played a very nice move here, knight to e3, basically blocking the queen's diagonal so that now he can move rook c7. Had he played rook c7 at once, black could have played queen g5, defending on g7, as well as offering to exchange the queens. That is why first white played knight e3, blocking the diagonal of the queen. And black played bishop b1. So even had he played a3, which looks more natural, white would have played rook c7, attacking g7, threatening checkmate. Black would be forced to play here, and then white would move his rook behind the pawn, after which a possible move by black would be bishop b1 with the threat of advancing. So he would have to play bishop b1 anyway later. So he played bishop b1 right away. White played rook c7, black played rook g1 defending g7, and now white played knight to d5. It's a nice move. Not only threatens knight f6 check, but it also has a deeper idea. For instance, if black continues advancing his pawn, white has a brilliant queen sacrifice. Queen takes g7 check. If black takes rook g7, he has to take on g7. White would play knight f6 check, forcing the king to go to h8. And then we have rook c8 check. White is a full queen down for only a couple of pawns, but black's king is checkmated in the corner. The only move is rook g8, after which white takes on g8 and black is checkmated. So we have a position where white played knight d5. Black had to go to h8. That is the only move. And now white played the rook behind the pawn to monitor black's pawn from advancing. Black played a3 anyway, and white played knight e7. His idea is to capture g8 and then deliver a checkmate on g7. Black played rook f8, and now white played a deceptively simple move. He could have continued queen c7, indirectly attacking g7. His idea would have been to play knight g6, clearing the rank for the queen and the rook and checkmating black. Black would have to play king h7. That is the only move, because knight g6 would not be a check anymore. And if white plays knight g6, black would continue to somehow defend g8. And if black plays knight f5, threatening checkmate on g7, black would have to play this. And against a move like knight g7, it seems white is winning, but then black plays king h8, and somehow black hangs on. I mean, it's not easy to find a win for white, because black also has some counterplay. His g file is opened, his pawn is quite close to promotion, and there is no straightforward win for white. So in this position, although queen c7 looks tempting, it does not win right away. White played a surprising move and a very deep move, that is, he advanced his pawn to d5. Well, the reason for advancing the pawn is not that white wants to promote his pawn, as we shall see, but he is basically weaving a mating net around black's king. Black advanced his pawn to a2, trying to tie down the white rook from a7 square, but now white played queen c7. The same idea of playing knight g6 check and queen g7 checkmate. Black had to play king h7. White played knight g6. Black had to play rook g8. That is the only move. And here white played the most visual move of the game, the most brilliant move of the whole game, that is queen to f7. Now this move is brilliant because it threatens a checkmate by sacrificing white's queen. If black takes on c3, white will demonstrate his plan by taking on g8 check. The king captures the queen. White plays rook a8 check. If the king goes to h7, we have the obvious met rook h8. The knight and the rook combines and delivers checkmate. If the king goes to f7, the rook goes to f8, and now we see why the move d5 was played. It controls the e6 square, and the black king is unable to escape from e6. Also, there was another very nice way. After queen f7, if black plays bishop to g6, removing the knight, white would capture on g6 with his pawn. After king h8, white has another brilliant way of winning, another queen sacrifice, that is queen g8 check, king g8, and rook a8 checkmate. So after queen f7, black is unable to defend against the queen sacrifice by white, and black resigned very gracefully. He smiled and shook his hands, and that was the end of the game. Ding Liren defeats Jan Nepomniachtchi in sixth game and equalizes by 3 games all. Now this has been a remarkable game because Ding played a near perfect game, and he lost the previous game. He bounced back for the second time in the match. So we have a very interesting situation, both the players having won 2 games each after 6 rounds, we have the score evenly tied on 3 points each. So I shall be back again after the 7th game, after a day's break, because after the 6th round the players have a day's rest, and we shall be watching another spectacular game on the 7th round. Till then, goodbye.